Today, I have this old Bachmann track inspection car to work on because it does not run properly. The first step is to test this thing out. I do know exactly what is wrong with this unit. I'll let you know in a second, but first I'll give it some power and just show you what it does. This is about 80% power, and as you can probably hear, the motor itself actually sounds really healthy, but the thing is not going anywhere, and that's because this model is missing its traction tires. So as you saw just then, the motor itself does turn over, but this model does not move, and that's because of the missing traction tires, which I'll show you in a second. But before we tear into this thing, I'll show you around this model, which I got in a lot off of eBay several months ago. And overall, this model is actually in pretty rough shape. It's just generally very filthy. I'm going to need to take the shell off and clean it, but a lot of the paint and the decals are fading. I've seen that happen a lot on these specific track inspection vehicles. I don't know why. I'm not going to be repainting it because that's not really what I do, but we are going to give this thing a good mechanical tear down and clean up, even though the motor itself sounds pretty healthy. On this side, it's more of the same. There's just a lot of dirt all over this model. Same with the front of the unit. It also kind of looks like the glass may be out of position there, so that might need to get glued back into place. On the other side, the little plow is actually fallen off. I have it right here, and we can reattach that after we wash off the shell. On the roof, it's got almost everything here except one of these hatches, which actually covers the tank, because this is an actual track cleaning vehicle. As you can see with the pad down here, these just kind of cover the tank where whatever liquid you put in there is supposed to go. One of those is missing. I don't think that's going to be the end of the world. Flipping the model over, these two wheels right here are the only ones that drive it, and both of them are missing their traction tires, which are kind of oddly sized. I have a solution for that though. The pad looks to be a little bit worn out, and everything down here looks to be in pretty good shape. However, the wheels on both of these end trucks are not the greatest. I found on the couple that I've had in the past, they seem to seize up, and that's the case on this one. I cannot move them on this end. These ones right here do move, the outer ones don't, and on the back truck, neither of these move. So that's something I also need to try and clean up, and that might be a little bit difficult. So to start, I just got to take the shell off. It's held in just by two clips on each side, and you can just kind of pry it off by hand. It's nice and simple. So now that we have the shell off, I've actually noticed a couple more things. I was correct, the glass did actually fall out of the shell. On the inside, the shell also looks very filthy, so it's definitely going to need a good wash in just a second. On the inside, I'm thinking I might want to redo some of this wiring, because you can see kind of closer to this tank, it's a little bit rusted down there. It's the same case on the other side. This wire is kind of bent out of place. I didn't see the headlight working when we were testing this. We've got this wire, which actually isn't attached to this truck anymore. And overall, this whole wiring system could just use a little bit of an improvement. So while we're in here, I'll probably do that, since this should not be too lengthy of a restoration or repair, whatever you want to call it. These two pieces here also fell out, so I just need to screw those back into place, likely with new screws, because I would suspect that these ones are not long enough, but I can definitely find something to do that. So before we start the process of reviving this thing, I'm going to put the chassis over here, and I'm going to wash all the components of the shell really quick and come back. So the shell has been washed and is now drying. Somehow just using a little soap and water managed to remove some of those really faded decals, so that thing will definitely be in the queue for a repaint at some point, but we'll see. For now though, we can start working on the chassis of this thing, and I think I want to see how much of this I can take off. And I'm thinking I want to start with trying to get this tank off. I think it is likely held in by this screw here and potentially that screw right here. So I'm just going to see if I can unscrew these and potentially take that whole tank off, because that'll give me some more access to the wiring underneath it. And apparently it was held on by just that one screw. Just taking a look here, it looks like to get these trucks off, they're just kind of held in by one screw with a little tab on it for a wire to attach to on both ends. Again, I'm going to be redoing the whole wiring system, so I really don't care about if they break off or not. But I'm just going to try and unscrew these. It might be a little difficult to see just because of the angle of it, but I've just got to do this on both ends of the model, and then I should be able to drop both of these trucks out. Next up, we have these two very rusted looking screws, which I believe hold in these contacts down here. So now I've got to unscrew that. Next up, I'm just going to remove the little plate that holds this track cleaner bit on. While I was in there, I also just took out this one wheel set, and now all that's left before the frame is completely empty is I think we just need to take out this one screw that holds the motor in, and then we can theoretically drop this entire truck out of the locomotive. And now with everything separated, I think I'm going to go take this shell, chassis, whatever you want to call it, and give it a good wash with some soap and water. And on here, there shouldn't be any decals or anything to run off. Plus, it's just plain black, so this should be fairly easy to paint if I need to. But I'll be back once I've got this washed off, and we can work on everything else here while it's drying. So the chassis and the track cleaning tank have both been cleaned with some soap and water with much better results than the shell. And I think first I want to see if I can manage to free up the wheels on both of these trucks. What I am thinking is on the insulated side, I can try and pry off the wheel itself and then see if I can get the shaft to be pushed off when the wheel's off, and see if that way we can free this up somehow. And that's not what I was expecting to happen. The wheel itself came off, the insulator didn't. So I'll see if I can fight that a little bit off camera and see if I can figure out a way to get that insulator off. Well, that was a very simple problem to solve. I just kind of pried up on the other end of this, and that slid it out. And just judging by the way this looks, I'm thinking the easiest way to get this thing moving again would probably just be to put a little bit of oil on this shaft and then just kind of spin it through here a little bit. Hopefully that'll lubricate everything in here, and that way it should actually move and not get stuck again. All right, and it looks like this wheel set is all put back together. I think all I want to do is I want to check the gauge on this really quick with my standards tool. I'll come back and then we'll clean off the wheels on this one little bit. Both sets of wheels appear to be engaged, so now it's time to just clean these wheels off with a little bit of rubbing alcohol, see if that helps clean them up any little bit. So for that truck, I think that's about as good as I'll get it. These ones admittedly do not look perfect. The insulated side also does not look great, but that's not going to be picking up any power, so I'm not too concerned about that. It mostly just looks like oxidation, so I could go in and fight this with my fiberglass pencil, but I really don't think in this case it's worth it. Now, it's time to do the exact same thing, except a little bit quicker, with the other truck. So now both of these trucks are done, the wheels are freed up. I would not recommend using that much oil on an axle like these, but seeing how stuck these were, that actually made all the difference. And now these roll freely, which means they should actually be able to pick up power effectively, which is important. Both these are isolated on different sides, so one side can pick up power from one side of the rail, and the other side can pick up power from the other side of the rail. So that way this model, with all its weird pickups and whatnot, can get enough power. We've got this one wheel set as well, which picks up power on both sides from these little contacts right here. Then on the motor itself, this one wheel, I don't think it picks up any power. It might, but since it'll be covered with traction tires, it doesn't matter that much. And then with these two axles, one of these picks up from one side, the other one picks up from the other. So it's a really weird electrical system, and having all these wheels clean is definitely going to make a difference. So next up, we're going to fight this one lone wheel. And while this one's isolated, since it's got these little pickups on both sides and the frame is completely plastic, it really does not matter which way this wheel set goes in the model, so I'm not worrying about that. And after that brief little bit of cleaning, this one wheel set looks a lot better. I got almost all of the rust off of both ends, which is really good. We got all the rust off of the frame as well when I went to go scrub it with some soap and water. So all the rust there should be gone, and that should make all our power pickup flow a lot better. So I think I've had a very slight change of plans here. I don't actually think I'm going to go in and do a full teardown of this motor block. In just about every other repair or rebuild I would do on a locomotive, I'd definitely be going in and tearing down the motor. But judging by how well this thing runs, I really don't think it's needed. I'll just put some power into this thing. I've got it hooked up with some leads to my controller right here, and we'll give it just a little bit of power. And as you can see, it's actually running very smoothly, even at like a very low speed, which is really shocking for an old Bachmann like this. Usually these motors are really problematic, they don't run really well, but since this one's running great, I'm just going to leave it alone and give it a little bit of oil. I really don't think this is a very high mileage model looking at the wear on the wheels, so I really don't think it's going to hurt if we don't go in and tear this thing down. But yes, for just about any other rebuild I would do of any other locomotive, I'd go in and tear down this truck, but really, I don't think I can make it run any better than this. This is about the best I've seen one of these old Bachmann motors run, so aside from just a little tiny bit of fresh oil, again, I'm just going to leave this thing alone. And there we go, that's about all the oil this model is going to need. I will also provide a little bit of fresh oil to these two wheel sets right here. It's not going to be a huge deal. And then after this, I'll go in and I'll just clean up this one pair of wheels here and these two pairs of wheels back here. So all the mechanical work for this model is done, and now it's going to be the slightly more annoying task of wiring everything back up. I want to replace all the wires on this model, and each side is going to need 3 wires. For one, each end will need to have one of these. This wire is the one that runs to these trucks that we just worked on to pick up power. It needs to correspond to the insulated side of the wheels, so it would be this side, and in this case, this wire would be running to the back, and then the other wire, which in this case it's actually broken off, it was right here, would be running to the front. And then for this wheel, it really does not matter. We just need 2 wires going to the back, and they just need to be on the exact same side of the motor block as they're wired up to. It should not be too complicated. And then we also need to add a new headlight in, likely with some new wires. So it should be a pretty simple job to wire up, and hopefully I don't screw any of this up and I get all of the insulation and wiring direction correct. I just brought the cleaned up frame over here just so I can line up exactly how far apart all this wire will be, just so I can get a rough estimate of how long I need to cut all these pieces. I'm probably going to wind up getting it wrong, but we'll see. I can organize the wiring if need be, and the wiring I'm going to be using I have a bunch of. It's not really optimally sized. It is a bunch of this 22 gauge wire. I've actually got both black and red just to make the direction of this nice and simple, and that way, in theory, we don't get any of the wiring backwards. So I actually found a headlight that should work. It's already got wires attached to it, so I'm just going to see if I can solder this directly onto here. And with that out of the way, now we can go on to the rest of the wiring. My phone was just about to run out of power, so I did a small bit of work off camera just while I let it charge a little bit. I got rid of all the old wiring. I cut out the new pieces that we need. I have not tinned these ones yet, but they're all stripped and they're going to be nice and simple to tin when the time comes. And then I put them out of the way for the time being. But with all our little contacts and pieces like these, I actually just put on a little bit of fresh solder, so it should stick and adhere just fine. And with that out of the way, it's time to continue with the right side of this model, then move on to the two wires on the left side. I just took a little break for lunch and I also did some more work off camera, but it's just about time to put this thing back together. The work I've done just consisted of cleaning up my wiring. I know this really does not look the greatest, but seeing as how this is a model that really isn't the nicest thing in the world and never will be a model that's the nicest thing in the world, I think it's fine. Especially given the electrical system, I don't think it would be very likely for this thing to short. So while it doesn't look the prettiest, I think this side's a little bit better than the other side. It'll definitely work, and it'll do what it needs to do. I also found that for these weights, when they had just fallen out, the posts that were supposed to hold them in were actually broken. So I found some screws that were about the same size as the hole for the original post, and they actually fit through here, and they fit just about perfectly. So I just kind of tapped those in, and those seem to work. And then for the rusted screws that were holding these pickups for this wheel into place, I actually just tapped in some of my little black self-tapper screws. They were rusted, I think, mostly in part due to this piece right here, which I've cleaned up. And I'm kind of hoping that these screws, since they're black and they're actually painted, they should be a little more resistant to rust, just in case that this happens to leak water or fluid or something like that. It might just be a little bit of added protection against rust back there. but it's time to start putting this locomotive back together, at least back onto the chassis. I'm going to start with this one wheel set right here, which goes right in here. Then we'll move on to the motor truck. Then we'll stick these pieces in. Then I will stick this little pad on, then the cleaning tank, and then we'll put the weights on at the very end. So the chassis has been put fully back together. The shell is obviously not on it, and obviously we have not put on the liquid traction tires yet, but I just want to see if that electrical work actually worked. It's probably not going to move, but I just want to make sure that the motor will turn over and that there won't be any short circuits or anything like that, so I'll give it some power really quick. Well, that's different. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's still very much so slipping because it doesn't have traction tires. But I guess because of all the work I've done, it actually moves without traction tires, which is kind of shocking. I guess freeing up all those wheels, giving it some fresh oil, and all that little bit of work made a pretty huge difference. So now let me take this thing back over to my desk and we can apply some liquid traction tires, and that should take a little while. So I have the unit flipped over and hooked up to my controller so we can put some of this stuff on it. I've made a video on this just recently in the past if you want to go check that out, but I'm essentially just going to be putting it on here with the wheel rotating away from me until it's sufficiently full of green traction tire liquid, and then I've just got to let this thing run for several hours to let it dry, and then tomorrow we can come back, put the shell and everything back on the model, and test it out. So it's now the next day, and our liquid traction tires down here have dried, and they actually look pretty good. I think they should be able to propel the locomotive. While they were running and drying out, I decided to go in and clean up all these other wheels a little bit more. They still do not look perfect, and beforehand really didn't look perfect, so I spent a lot of time with a fiberglass pencil and some rubbing alcohol trying to clean them all. It probably would have been better if I had used some sort of polishing wheel or buffing wheel or something to clean them up, but I don't really have anything like that on hand, so for now this will just have to do, and hopefully it's enough pickup to get the model to move. And now really all that we have left to do is to stick the shell onto this thing and test it out. So as you can see, I've got the little track inspection car set up on my loop, and I'll give this thing some power and we'll see what it does. As you can probably see and hear, that electrical pickup is not the greatest, but other than that, the motor seems to be running smoothly, and the model seems to be capable of actually moving itself. So as I said, these wheels might need a little bit more work once I get some more tools, but I think this is really good compared to how this model was acting before. Now let's go the other direction. And it's stalled. That's a little bit of a trouble spot on my layout, but I still think that's pretty successful given how this locomotive was acting before we started working on it, and given the condition of the wheels. So it's now a little while later, and I've actually fixed the issue. I figured out that the trucks in the front and the rear were actually not touching the track enough. I just had to readjust the wiring I had in there, and now the thing actually runs smoothly. I also took out the headlight because I found out that it actually had some issues of its own, and I got rid of it. So there's no more light in this thing, and I fixed the front and rear trucks, and now it runs smoothly. So while this little track inspection car is not in perfect shape, I think that repair was a huge improvement. Sure, the cosmetics of this model need a lot of work, the wheels could probably still use with a little bit more cleaning, but the thing runs smoothly, the liquid traction tire compound worked, all my wiring seems to be good, and this model is actually usable again. I am thinking of potentially repainting this thing in the future. I'm not sure if I'll leave it as is or not, but I've got a few options. I could repaint it as a Union Pacific model. I was also thinking I may have some spare Pennsylvania Railroad decals, so we could paint this as a Pennsylvania Railroad model. Or I have some Amtrak decals laying around, and we could turn this into an Amtrak track inspection vehicle, which Amtrak themselves I don't think actually had, but Bachmann did sell these in a slightly different Amtrak track inspection paint scheme, so that couldn't be too far off either. But if you've got any opinion on any of those paint schemes, please let me know.